Hello! So today we are going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of October. Sorry there wasn't a video on Tuesday. So I read, in the month of October, I read a total of 5 books. I finished 5 books and 1 novella, and I also started 2 other books, Absolution by Jeff Vandermeer and Toll the Hounds by Stephen Erickson. Neither one of those, actually am at the very beginning of each of those. I didn't get as far into them this month as I had hoped that I would, so both of those will be continuing into November, but we're going to be talking about the books that I completed in October. Here's a quick look at them. It was surprisingly more heavy in like the contemporary literary fiction genre, with also getting some fantasy and sci-fi in there. What's fun about this month is that I have an unpopular opinion on almost all the books that I read this month. Almost everything I read, I either loved too much or not enough to fit with the opinions that I primarily see about these books. So strap yourself in for a couple of opinions that you may want to disagree with me in the comments, and I hope you will. I hope that we can have some good discussions around these books and how that all works out. We are going to start with a book that was very popular back in the day. I never picked it up because I didn't think it was going to be my thing, but I was convinced recently to pick it up and it was not my thing. So we're going to start with The Fault in Our Stars. He was looking for the most hurtful way to tell the truth. But of course, I already knew the truth. I had years of staring at ceilings from my bedroom to the ICU, and so I'd long ago found the most hurtful ways to imagine my own illness. So I'll keep this one short because I did a whole live stream for this book with my friend Amber Elise. We have a book club where it's called Opposites Attract because we have exactly opposite opinions on books, and it has been consistently true. We have hated every single book that we have read for each other leading up to this book club, and this was my least grumpy of all the grumpies that she has made me read. I was the least grumpy about this book is what I mean. It was still 2 stars. I still didn't like it. Let's see. Let me come up with a short version way of describing how I felt about this book. It was so boring. I knew that the book was trying to make me emotional. That was clear. It was very obvious that it really wanted to make me cry. Did it provide enough substance to do that? No, it was mostly annoying. It was mostly pretentious sounding kids that were talking around in circles trying to prove that they were the most intelligent one in the room. That's me being a little bit bratty, but I'm gonna stand by it. It would be fine if 1 or 2 of the kids had this very pretentious dialogue, but it's all of them. It's all of them. Whether it's one of the kids that's really fixated on literature and can quote any author at any point, or if it's the kid that pretends to be British and puts on a false accent and everybody just accepts it because that's just the way she is, or if it's the love interest that walks around with a cigarette in his mouth at all times because he puts the killing thing right between his lips, but he never lights it because he won't let it actually have that power over him. It's a metaphor. He tells everyone this, and then she starts spouting it too. He has a cigarette in his mouth on an airplane, and the flight attendant comes up to him and says, "Hey man, you can't have that. Put it away." And our main character says, "It's a metaphor. Honey, we're on a plane, it doesn't matter. Like, this is not the time. Put the cigarette away, that's really obvious. I don't care if you're not gonna light it." Oh, the only not insufferable characters in this book were the parents, and hey, awesome. There were active parents who loved their kids in a YA novel, and I think that that's awesome. I don't have a lot of follow-up on that. A lot of the notes in this book are me underlining lines and just writing, "Shut up." There you go. There, it just focused. I don't know if you can even see that, but yeah, it was just a lot of, I don't know, it was a lot of pages for not a lot of story. I'm not giving this book a lot of credit. I actually think that it has so much opportunity for discussion, which is why that was probably my favorite discussion, or one of my favorite discussions that Amber, Elise, and I have had in a book club yet. Because even though I don't care for this book. We had so much to talk about with the things that the characters were going through, with some of the dialogue they had, with the way that they viewed themselves, and with the way they navigated life. One really striking line near the beginning was when she was in group therapy, and the guy who was leading the group was talking about his illness that he had, and then talking about his life now that he is in recovery. And she called it depressing, not because of what he went through, but because of what his life right now is, because of how boring and mundane his life is. I just talked about another thing that I really liked about the book, but I'm gonna have to cut it all in editing because I realized that it's all spoilers. So anyway, there were things that I did like about the book, and again, created some amazing conversation between Amber, Elise, and I. Lots to discuss, and I definitely don't want to discredit the book as a whole because there's plenty to discuss in it. I just hated the way it was written. So, there you go. Next up is Divided Allegiance. This is the sequel to The Sheep Farmer's Daughter. What I am saying, Marshall, is that you have known her but a short time. I have known her for years. You have seen her in one trouble. I've seen her in many. I know her as someone trustworthy in battle, in long campaigns, day after day. You see some flaw, some little speck on a shining ring, and condemn the whole, but I see the whole. The years of service, the duties faithfully performed, and that is good, Marshall. Is there any one of us with no flaws? Are you perfect that you indict her? So I will start off by saying that I definitely liked this book more than I liked book one, which also had kind of a middle of the road rating for me. I think one of my big complaints in book one was that I felt very disconnected from everything. I thought that the main character felt very emotionally distant from near everything that was happening, and the side characters too more felt like assets to the story and to the character rather than their own living, breathing characters, and both of those things I thought were improved on in book two. So this book is, in my mind, broken up into three quests. The first one, Pax, our main character, is going on a trip, a quest with an elf. That whole section I thought was good fun. I thought it was a good start to the story. I enjoyed it. I laughed. The second section is what dragged for me and was more reminiscent of some of the things that I didn't love so much in book one. We had a fantasy school. We had training, weapons, geography, history. It was a lot of repetitive information and repetitive action and information given through dialogue. And I just didn't care. I think that this world is really well built up, but the way information is distributed in this series is so dry to me. There's also quite a bit of lightness in this trilogy up to this point where I'm talking about. There's a lot of lightness to it, and that's another piece of it that makes me disconnected, because there's a lot going on in this story, but everything just feels very hopeful, and Pax seems to do no wrong, which leads us into part three, and that's the part of the book that was actually fantastic. Now we're going to throw out everything that I said about the lightness and the hopefulness and the Pax doing no wrong, because now I won't say much about this section of the story, but I will say that it is dark, that it takes a strong turn, and basically everything that I complain about this story is now shoved to the side, and everything that this story can do is amplified to its highest degree. This section of the story was bleak, it was hopeless, it was emotional, it drew me so close to the characters and to what was happening, and I was so invested in everything that went on with Pax and with any side characters that we interacted with, and with the plot as a whole. It was beautifully and tragically written, and I loved this section of the story. I would say that the final section of this book is probably 5 stars for me, but coupled with the other 2 sections is what drags the overall rating down. And with that concluding thought, you would think that I would continue on to book 3, but I won't. And the reason is because with both books 1 and 2, I had more of the story story that I just felt ambivalent about than that I felt extremely invested in. And this seems to be, after 2 books, what this story is for me, is a lot of ambivalence and a little bit of excellence. This is one of the books that I, again, would call myself having an unpopular opinion on. I don't think that this trilogy is extremely popular. I could be wrong about that. I don't see a lot of people talking about it, but the people that do talk about it love this trilogy so much. My dad is one of them. My dad has read all 3 books. He's read all 3 books 3 times. No, the last book he's read 2 times. He adores these books, and I just wish I did too. I just don't. Next up is Skin Game. This is one where I don't have an unpopular opinion. Dresden people love this book. I loved this book. It got a spoiler-filled review, and because this is so far into the series, once again, I really don't have a lot of thoughts to give you in a spoiler-free fashion, other than to just tell you that the series is great. I'm still loving it, and I'm going to be doing the collection of short stories next month, so I'm looking forward to that as well. This one got 4 stars. There's no cutaway. I don't have a quote for you, but it got 4 stars. Okay, next up, Hummingbird Salamander by Jeff Vandermeer. Some things remain mysterious, even if you think about them all the time. This book has a 3.25 rating on Goodreads. It was 5 stars for me. This book was such chaos, and I loved it. We walk in the dark in this story as Vandermeer slowly takes us through the madness that's happening and slowly peels back the many, many layers of what in the world is going on. So we're following a character who goes by Jane Smith. There is a woman who has died. Her name is Sylvina. Her name is Sylvina. She's an eco-terrorist. No, her name's Sylvia. I just wrote it down wrong. It's fine, everything's fine. How do I describe this book? How do I give you a summary of the plot to give you an idea of what you're in for? This book starts with Sylvia, the person who's died. She left a key in a lockbox, and Jane turns that key and finds a taxidermied hummingbird and a set of clues, which she follows, which leads to a taxidermied salamander. Also, there's a man following her. Doesn't really tell you anything about the plot. Jane essentially destroys her life, her marriage, her relationship with her kids, her work, everything, to try to follow this mystery, to try to figure out what happened to Sylvia and what in the world is going on. Like, she becomes so obsessive that her life around her crumbles. She's not very likable. She's very terse. She's very brass. She couldn't care less about people, about making people feel good or not traipsing all over them in her quest for knowledge. She is exhausting to be in the head of sometimes, but also as the story progresses, we learn more about her background, about her traumas, about what got her to the point that she's at now. And at least for me, as the story went on, it didn't change any of who she was, but it did make me understand her more, to the point that she became a lot more sympathetic, or at the very least compelling. This book is so suspenseful in certain places as we follow these clues, as we get closer and closer to the answers, as we go through scenarios like Sylvia, or her name is Jane, like Jane going into a new location and trying to find the man who is following her, and only to be told by the person waiting there saying, "Oh yeah, your boyfriend was here 10 minutes ago." She's like, "My boyfriend?" And she goes, "Yeah, he said that you guys were on a scavenger hunt, and you would think it was funny that he got there first, and so I'm meant to tell you. I know it's you because he gave me this picture of you at your daughter's birthday." And it's like, this is not... We don't know this man. We're afraid of this man. Like, these scenarios as she's walking through this mystery. She, just like us, is walking through the dark. These scenes play out that are just really unnerving. But there's also scenes of just very disturbing stuff, awful things that happen. Vandermeer loves to write about nature, and I think he does it well. I think he does it very compellingly, and this book is in a different way than other books than his other books. This book is still very firmly about nature, about ecoterrorism, about wildlife trafficking, obsession, trauma, how far we're willing to go, and if we can make a difference in the world, if we push hard enough, if we go far enough. And I think that Jane's story and those things are tied so interestingly together as we watch Jane's life fall apart at the same time that we're exploring how the world is falling apart. I don't know. Vandermeer writes weird books. I'm not surprised when people don't like his books, but I am continually surprised by how much I do. Next up is the novella that I read this month. That's Saturation Point. Cold-bloodedness is the best diet. So this book, funnily enough, is different from Hummingbird Salamander in many, many ways, but it feels a lot like a Vandermeer book in many ways. Not in how, like, Vandermeer is crazy. And Adrian Tchaikovsky is a lot more grounded in the kind of, I mean, I don't know, he did write spiders in space. I don't know, it still just feels more grounded than Vandermeer. Anyway, this is following someone who has gone, okay, so in this dying Earth, there is a zone that is inhabitable for human life. But also the world kind of is too, you know, we have isolation, like all the people, everybody lives in very much in isolation, big corporations, nobody really interacts or talks with each other. But it also has the zone, which is this place of extreme heat and jungle and creatures that any human that enters, very, very, very few survive. Yet people keep going in to try to understand the zone, try to understand what is it? How is it still maintaining its presence? Can we use it to our advantage? And every crew that goes in to try to understand the zone, most everyone dies horribly. But we have one character who did go into the zone 20 years ago and did return. All of her research was turned in, so we think, but she still thinks about it constantly. She still looks back at what she was able to keep. It still is a big part of her. And now they're approaching her again and asking her to go back into the zone. And we go with her as she is documenting everything that she's seeing and hearing, and we can feel the panic off the page as she's experiencing stuff that she never expected. It's very much an us versus them kind of story. Expectations versus reality, humanity's folly, nature's resilience. See how I'm saying it sounds like a Vandermeer book? It's very claustrophobic, and even though it's like 56 pages, it's so short, it feels like a complete story. Like it feels like it used all of those 56 pages very well. Okay, next we have another unexpected rating is Never Let You Go. Never Let Me Go. It's me. Because somewhere underneath, a part of us stayed like that, fearful of the world around us, and no matter how much we despised ourselves for it, unable quite to let each other go. So this is probably Ishiguro's most popular, most loved work. At least as far as I can tell, this seems to be one that is consistently loved by Ishiguro fans, and other books are maybe moved around a little bit as far as how people rank them. But Never Let You Go is loved. And I enjoyed it a lot. I would actually say that I enjoyed it more than what the rating seems to reflect because I appreciated it so much. There were just a couple of things that dragged it down a little bit in overall rating. But this is a story following Kathy, who lives in a home full of unique, special kids, but we don't know what makes them unique and special, what the purpose of this home is. There's a lot that we don't understand. This is my second Ishiguro book, and so far both of these books have kind of started in this way of, here's the world, we're just going to start walking, and nobody knows, including our protagonist, nobody fully knows what's going on here, and we just have to keep going until the end when we finally put it together. So we're following Kathy, who at the point of narrating her story is 31, and she's looking back meticulously, very, very detailed, looking back on her life and on analyzing and assessing exactly what happened to her in her childhood, because she lived a very, very unique childhood, and in many ways, a very, very tragic one, though it may not seem like that on the surface. So Hailsham, this is the school that she lives in, is meant for these special children that have a special purpose, and all of their education is geared toward those two things. But the kids don't understand fully what makes them special or what their special purpose is. What's interesting is that the way that they're taught is that they're given little bits of information on why they're special and what makes them unique and what their purpose is. They give that little bit of information in their life alongside other information that's more interesting to them, so that by the time it's overtly understood exactly what's going on, they already have all the puzzle pieces. They already subconsciously know the answers. They just haven't fully processed it because it's been intentionally distributed to them in a way that they've been told without being told. And as we're looking back at the past, it's very meticulous and it's very conversational, where Kathy will bring something up and then say, but I don't want to talk about that yet. First, I want to process what happened here in this situation. And then she'll just go over it and move the pieces around. And it's like she's trying to sort through it all as she's telling us the story, so we're sorting through it all in this same very meticulous manner. And she has almost this very distant, almost ambivalent sort of tone in the way she's telling her story as well. And I think that's part of what made me feel a little bit distanced and ambivalent towards some of the details, as well as like the repetitive nature. There were certain sections of the story that we just stayed there for a while, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, I don't know that I care about this on this level. From her narration perspective, from the perspective of Kathy, who's going over and over and over the details and trying to piece it all together, it makes total sense. But for me, I wasn't always as invested in all the details or invested in every little ounce of what was being told. And the fact that it was being told in this sort of clinical, analytical way meant that I wasn't always completely drawn in. Whereas with Clara and the Sun, I felt so attached to Clara and to Josie and to their specific situation, even though I didn't fully understand what was behind everything that was happening. I felt so connected to Clara and to Josie. And Kathy, I can't say that I ever felt connected to her until the very end of the book. We're also interacting with other kids that are at Hailsham, and their interactions with each other. I'm just realizing that I own Hummingbird Salamander and Never Let Me Go, and I didn't hold up either of those books. They're both upstairs. It's fine. They're on the screen. Anyway, we're interacting with other characters as well, and we're seeing them as well go through the exact same things as Kathy is, but responding in very different ways and having different ways of trying to either control the situation or find a different way around the situation that they're in. I'm trying to think through how I say this, because it is a book that's best to go into not knowing certain elements of it. So I guess I'll just jump straight to what the book is doing. It's examining people who have grown up in these alienated social situations, in very controlled and restricted situations, and exploring things that are inherent to human nature, things like hope, dreaming, preservation, forgiveness when self-preservation is destructive, mortality and acceptance of that mortality, the nature of love and the quest for that love, and even loving someone at the wrong time. There's probably more themes that I could go into because this book did a lot, but I worry about saying too much because of the big reveal that happens in the book. I really don't want to steal that from anyone. So overall, I thought this book was brilliant. I mean, I loved so much about it. I buddy read this with Jimmy and Joanna. We had amazing discussions based off of theorizing and trying to understand what the book book was doing once it all came together, digging into those themes and comparing it to Clara and the Sun. I mean, we had awesome discussions on this book, but overall, I felt distanced from so much of what it was doing, unlike how I felt with Clara and the Sun. So this seems to be a book that is so heavily loved by Ishiguro fans, and Clara and the Sun is one that seems to be a little bit more controversial. Some people hate it, and some people do really enjoy it. I loved Clara and the Sun, and Never Let You Go was still a great book, but so much, Clara and the Sun was so much stronger to me. Okay, final book I read this month is called Housekeeping. There was not a soul there who knew how shallow-rooted the whole town was. It flooded yearly and had burned once. Often enough, the lumber mill shut down or burned down. There were reports that things were otherwise elsewhere, and anyone on a melancholy evening might feel that Fingerbone was a meager and difficult place. So this book starts off with two orphan girls who are being raised by their grandmother, but then their grandmother passes away. So they're raised by two elderly aunties who do not want the job. Well, they're cared for by them for a short time. Two ladies who can barely hear, and so when they whisper back and forth about the situation that these girls are in, they're really shouting, and the girls can hear everything. I did love them, even though they weren't around near long enough. These are the great aunts. And then they finally landed with their Aunt Sylvie, who simply didn't care. Didn't care about them, didn't care about how the home was kept, didn't care if they went to school, just let them be. I mean, they were neglected. I think the thing that made me love this book was the way it was written. The prose was stunning. Every sentence was so meticulously written so that each line felt like its own story in and of itself. You know how Patrick Rothfuss writes? It's totally different. But you know how Patrick Rothfuss writes where every line contains so much? This book, every line, or Frederick Bachman, oftentimes his lines, he'll say something so simple, but he'll say it so profoundly that it just contains so much within it. That's how this book felt. This book was so rich with atmosphere, with the characters, it was very detailed, it was very slow. You might even accuse me in this video of, because of books like Divided Allegiance and Never Let Me Go, that you might accuse me of not liking slow-paced, very highly detailed books. But Housekeeping is a great example of how that's not what the thing that holds me up is, because this book was so slow and so little was said in large swaths of the story, yet it was so beautifully told, so immersive, so detailed in a really rich way and not in a distant way, that I loved every moment with the story. I think that this book would be boring to so many people that read it, but I was not bored for a second. I loved this book. It was somber, slow-moving, and sad as we followed these two little girls who have experienced tragedy on tragedy in losing their family members and in what's gotten them to this point, and then watching them move forward from this point. It shows their resilience. It shows their devotion to their roots, to, you know, the things that their grandfather loved or that their father loved, like wanting to connect to those things and wanting to stay together no matter what, even in the worst of situations. It shows these kids that are kind of just clinging to whatever they have left, even if arguably what they have left really isn't the best for them. This book has abandonment, loneliness, loss, neglect, and just an attempt to keep going. And the girls that are just trying to survive in this family that is just trying to survive in this town, as you can tell by the quote at the beginning of this book review, that is just trying to survive. All of these things, much like Hummingbird Salamander, the setting and the themes and the characters, their individual stories are all kind of tangled together and reflecting back to one another in a very tragic way. But it also shows in a book, showing people just trying to go on, even in the worst of scenarios. It also shows us why some simply don't. It's such an interesting book to discuss too, because there's a character who doesn't want to keep going in this family line and keep going in, as I said, a scenario that one would argue is not best for these kids. There's a character that wants out of that and just wants kind of a more normal life and wants to not keep on with this resilience that this other character does. And there's this friction in the narrative between these two because of that. At least for me, it makes me want the discussion on, you know, who's right, or on what levels is each character right, what truly would be the best decision in this scenario. I thought this book was fantastic. I don't know that I recommend it, to be honest, because I don't know who would like this book, but I did. Anyway, those are the books that I read this month. I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble about them. Please do chat with me more in the comments if you've read any of them, if you want to discuss them further. I'll see you again soon. Bye.